The world has seen some of the most heinous and horrifying killers in the history of humanity. While some have been caught and punished, there are still some notorious killers who remain free and are yet to be captured. In this top 10 list, we will take a look at the most infamous serial killers still at large today. 1. The Zodiac Killer. The Zodiac Killer is one of the most notorious serial killers in American history. He is known to have killed at least 5 people in Northern California during the late 1960s and early 1970s. One of his most gruesome murders was that of a young couple, Betty Lou Jensen and David Faraday, who were shot dead while parked in a secluded area. The Zodiac Killer left taunting letters and cryptograms to the police and newspapers, which have still not been fully deciphered. 2. The Long Island Serial Killer. The Long Island serial killer, also known as the Gilgo Beach Killer, is responsible for the murders of at least 10 people, most of whom were young women who worked as prostitutes. The killer's victims were often dismembered and their bodies were dumped in remote areas on Long Island. One of his victims, Shanann Gilbert, was a sex worker who disappeared in 2010. Her disappearance led to the discovery of the killer's other victims. 3. The Monster of Florence. He was an Italian serial killer who operated in the late 1970s and early 1980s. He targeted couples who were parked in their cars in secluded areas, and he would shoot both the man and the woman before mutilating the woman's body. He would often remove her sexual organs as a trophy. The killer was never caught, and his identity remains unknown. 4. The Servant Girl Annihilator. The Servant Girl Annihilator was a serial killer who operated in Austin, Texas in the late 1800s. He targeted young women who worked as domestic servants, and he would break into their homes and bludgeon them to death with an axe. The killer was never caught, and the murders remain one of America's earliest unsolved serial killer cases. 5. The Axeman of New Orleans. The Axeman of New Orleans was a serial killer who operated in the early 1900s. He would break into people's homes and attack them with an axe, often killing them in their sleep. One of the most notorious attacks occurred in 1919, when the killer broke into an Italian grocer's home and murdered him and his wife, as well as their 2 young children. The Axeman claimed to be a demon from hell, and he sent a letter to a local newspaper saying that he would spare anyone who was playing jazz music in their home on a specific night. Many people in New Orleans played jazz that night in an attempt to avoid being killed by the Axeman. 6. The Cleveland Torso Murderer. The Cleveland Torso Murderer was an unidentified serial killer who operated in the 1930s. He would decapitate his victims and often dismember their bodies, leaving them in remote areas around Cleveland. The killer was never caught, and his identity remains a mystery. 7. The Colonial Parkway Killer. The Colonial Parkway Killer is responsible for the murders of at least 8 people in Virginia between 1986 and 1989. The killer targeted young couples who were parked in their cars on the Colonial Parkway, a scenic road that runs between Yorktown and Jamestown. The victims were usually shot or strangled, and their bodies were left in remote areas near the parkway. Despite an extensive investigation and numerous suspects, the killer has never been caught and his identity remains unknown. 8. The West Mesa Bone Collector. The West Mesa Bone Collector was an unidentified serial killer who operated in Albuquerque, New Mexico in the early 2000s. He is believed to have killed at least 11 women and buried their bodies in a mass grave on the West Mesa. The killer was never caught, and the case remains unsolved. 9. The Highway of Tears Killer. The Highway of Tears Killer is believed to be responsible for the murders of at least 18 women and girls in British Columbia, Canada, along a stretch of highway that has become known as the Highway of Tears. Most of the victims were Indigenous women and girls, many of whom were hitchhiking when they disappeared. Despite numerous investigations and suspects over the years, the killer has never been caught. 10. The Smiley Face Killer. The Smiley Face Killer is a theoretical serial killer who is believed to be responsible for the deaths of at least 40 young men across the United States since 1997. The victims are typically found in bodies of water, with a smiley face graffiti near the location of the body. Some investigators believe that these deaths may be the work of a group of killers or a serial killer who has yet to be identified or caught. These killers have left a trail of horror and destruction in their wake, yet they remain elusive and free. It's a chilling thought that they could still be out there, waiting to strike again. The world of serial killers is a dark and disturbing place, where the line between reality and horror becomes blurred. The top 10 list of serial killers still at large is a reminder that evil still exists in our society, and that there are people out there who are capable of unimaginable acts of violence. It also highlights the need for continued vigilance and awareness, as well as the importance of law enforcement agencies working together to bring these killers to justice. Please, stay safe and take care of your people. Thanks for watching.